In the past decade, there hasn't been a lot of new Star Wars games, and as a result, fans have turned to mods of existing Star Wars games, from classic Battlefront 2 all the way to Empire at War, and these mods are so good they exceed the quality of the official game itself. But why are we seeing less of these amazing Star Wars mods? And more importantly, why are we not seeing these kind of mods for newer Star Wars games like Jedi Fallen Order and EA's Battlefront 2? In this video, we're going to be diving into the logistic and technical reasons for why this is the case. But before we jump into it, hey, my name's Charlie, otherwise known as Family Bovine, and if you could leave a like on this video, it'll really help us grow. Also, our question of the day is, what is your favourite Star Wars mod? Just to note, it doesn't have to be from an official Star Wars game. But with that all said and done, let's dive right into the video. From the Sith Restoration mod for KOTOR 2, the conversion pack for Star Wars Battlefront 2, and Thrawn's Revenge for Empire at War, there has been so many talented people making Star Wars mods. But all of those mods that I just mentioned come from games that are at least a decade old. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying mods for newer Star Wars games suck per se, but they're definitely lacking a lot more texture and gameplay differences. Most of them, whilst very visually impressive, are just model changes at the end of the day. And this point is even more apparent for EA's Battlefront 1 and 2. We're not really seeing any new game modes or new levels to play, content that adds more playability to the game. There is actually more than one answer to this, so I'll break them down one by one in this video. So reason 1, old games are just simply easier to mod for. So this can actually attribute to coding new stuff, but more importantly being able to model stuff that kind of matches the same quality of the game. The low poly, low texture look of the original Battlefront 2 is just very easy to make content for compared to EA's visually stunning Battlefront 2 version. The higher polys, the better textures, the better shaders all make it much more difficult for one person to create content for that game. And yes, Battlefront 2 is a very controversial Star Wars game. Its graphics was so far ahead of its years. So much so that current 2021 releases don't even look half as good as 2017 Battlefront 2. That's a lot of competition that one modder has to compete with. So it makes the decision a lot easier from a technical and visual side to just work on classic Battlefront 2. Our second reason on the list is the constraints of the Frostbite engine. Unlike most platforms to make games like Game Maker Studio, Unity and Unreal Engine 4, Frostbite is actually a closed source engine only given out to select game developer companies. So if you want to make a game for yourself, you won't be able to use that engine. Your game has to be approved by EA and then they give you access to their engine. Because of this, it makes modding so much harder because less people know the complexities of the engine itself. There's a lot you can do with games made in Unity and even Unreal Engine 4. There's a lot of experts that know these game engines inside out, which makes modding a lot easier. But with Frostbite, only developers under EA get that privilege. This hasn't stopped some modders, however. Frosty is one of the most advanced modding platforms for games running on DICE's Frostbite engine. This is the most commonly used tool that modders use when they want to modify games like Battlefront 2. However, that in itself is very limited, as it only really allows you to inject the custom textures and models into the game. New gameplay features, new levels is just not simply possible. If you think that's bad, before that, Jedi Fallen Order and Battlefront 2 had to take existing models and deform them to look like different characters. It made the job of modding so much more longer and difficult to do, and the results were questionable at least. For example, this is a modified version of Cal to look like Darth Vader. As you can tell, it's not perfect. So tools like Frosty making it a lot easier to inject your own models for Battlefront 2 was a blessing. I don't think we'll see tools that allow people to add new levels and gameplay elements, and we'll get into that reason a little bit later on in the video. Third on our list, developers actually added a lot of mod support in their older Star Wars games. Remember when you would boot up your old copy of Empire at War and then hit the options button? You were greeted with the option to click the mods button. From there, you could easily load up a custom mod that you would put into the mod folder of your Star Wars Empire at War. This and many other Star Wars games made it very modder friendly, so that when developers have finished with the game, modders could essentially take over and continue making new content. This is why we're able to get new and awesome ships in, say, Thrawn's Revenge or the Waking of the Rebellion. That's like the equivalent of adding in a new enemy to fight in Jedi Fallen Order. And when I last looked, there isn't anything like that for Jedi Fallen Order. It's because Respawn Entertainment didn't allow modders easy access to their game to make new content. Now, Bombastic has done a really good job at trying to piece together old, unused assets from Jedi Fallen Order and getting them working, but those were from the official devs of the game. There hasn't been anything made by mods of that same caliber. Petroglyph allowed modders to do exactly that and then add their own content as well. And not only that, as long as players ran the same version of the same mod at the same time, they could even move that content to multiplayer as well. And because of these tools, it allows players to run these same mods and play them together at the same time. Battlefront 2 Classic really relied on this, something which current Battlefront 2 just doesn't have. And because of that, a lot of the mods have to stay client-side and not interact with EA servers. And that's actually a perfect transition into our fourth point. EA dedicated servers for multiplayer. This is more specifically geared towards EA's Battlefront series compared to Jedi Fallen Order, but because the majority of the game is through multiplayer only, giving modders too much access to the game could lead to widespread cheating. Mods that could allow you to have unlimited health, etc, etc. So because of this, modders for Battlefront 2 have to really make sure their custom injections into the game are multiplayer safe. And this alone restricts a lot of modders. If modders and players alike could run their own private servers of EA's Battlefront 2, then a lot of these multiplayer safe restrictions would be lifted. But in typical EA fashion, they've made sure Frostbite does a good job at preventing this. And for that reason alone, this is why you see a big difference in classic Battlefront 2 mods to EA Battlefront 2 mods. For our fifth and final point, it comes down to the complexity of the engines used for these games. For example, one of the most modded games in video game history is Skyrim. Now, Skyrim isn't totally new, but people were able to make fantastic mods thanks to Bethesda releasing their own developer tools. This made it so easy for people to make their own Skyrim mods. The next most modded game in history is Minecraft. And the reason that game is so easy to mod for is because it was made in Java, which is a really unusual language to code in when you're making a game of this complexity. But the thing with Java code is that it can be decompiled into source code relatively easily. This allows people to make really complex mods and just simply inject it into Minecraft and it'll work. For the consoles and Windows 10 versions of Minecraft, it's coded in C++, which makes it a lot harder to mod for, which is why we don't see many mods for it. GTA 5 might not look like an old game per se, but the reason there's so many mods for the game is because modders have developed some crazy advanced tools that make modding a really complex game just super easy. And the reason GTA 5 has modding tools like they do, when Battlefront 2 and Jedi Fallen Order don't, is simply because GTA 5 came out a decade ago, which means it has given modders a lot of time to make big breakthroughs into cracking the compiled code. EA's Star Wars Battlefront 2 has only been out for about 4 or 5 years. As for Jedi Fallen Order 2, it's only been out for 2. If those games did carry on being as big as they are, all the way until say 2026, then yeah, Jedi Fallen Order probably would have some really good mods later on down the line. But Jedi Fallen Order 2 is just around the corner and many people will move on, meaning the need for mods for games like Jedi Fallen Order will just fade away. As for EA Battlefront 2, however, the Frostbite engine is almost impossible to penetrate, and I mentioned those reasons why in a previous point in this video. The only other option you could include that could allow people to make really good mods for both BF2 and Jedi Fallen Order is simply to reverse engineer the code. We've seen this happen to games like Super Mario 64, as well as just recently Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Decompiling, in simple terms, is just pretty much rewriting the game all by yourself. It's a stupendously difficult task just for N64 games that came out well over 20 years ago. For the Super Mario 64 decompilation project, it took them almost 2 years to do. Now imagine trying to do it for a new game like Jedi Fallen Order. It would take way more than 2 years to decompile that game, so it just doesn't make that option viable. Overall, unless game companies allow people to mod their games with developer tools, newer AAA games will become increasingly difficult to mod. But don't lose out on hope. With EA losing their exclusivity license and many other game companies coming into the mix to make Star Wars games, we might see some developers be a bit more friendly to modders and welcome the idea of modders updating and changing their game to increase the longevity of it. Just take a look at Star Wars Empire at War. That game came out in 2006, and thanks to incredible modders and artists, the game is still going stronger than ever 15 years down the line. Well, that pretty much wraps up today's video. What's your thoughts on all the points that I gave today? Do you agree with them, or do you think I missed something out that I should have included? Let me know in the comments down below. I read all of them, and I'll try to get back to some of you as well. Of course, don't forget our question of the day, which is, what is your favourite Star Wars mod? Let me know all of that in the comments, but besides that, I've been Charlie, you've been watching EcksToo, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.